This is a J. Dyer production. And this is Jamie Dyer welcoming you to this edition of the 90s and Noughties UK podcast, where Hayley is my guest in the Empty Compartment and Simm is my guest to guess this week's celebrity birthday.
This is 90s and Noughties UK, a podcast on UK pop culture of the 90s and 2000s. If you want to contact the show, email 90esandnoughties@gmail.com, tweet us on @90esandnoughties UK on Twitter, or check us out on Facebook, 90s and Noughties UK.
So welcome to this edition of the 90s and Noughties UK podcast with me, Jamie Dyer. And continuing on from last week, the show will be around 30 minutes again, which I think is the ideal length at the moment. It's less material for me to find, and it's jam-packing, if that is the phrase, all of your favourite features into that time slot rather than stretching them out. Now, in just a moment, you're going to hear Hayley talking to me as part of the feature formerly known as the Empty Compartment. Then Simm will be joining me for celebrity birthdays to guess whose birthday it is in the week of this broadcast. And these features, we're always looking for guests. I'm always looking for guests to take part in these features, and they could be the ones that I've just spoken about, or they could be brand new ones. I'm working on one with Dice, which will be interesting, kind of based on the RPG type thing. I do quizzes sometimes, other times just straightforward interviews, hoping to have some of those in future weeks. But again, we'll have to wait and see on that. And just lots of things, actually, that I like to work on. So if you are interested, you can email, you can tweet, you can Facebook message, and we can try and organise something either via Clean Feed, Zoom, or Skype. Because, you know, I like to get people involved. I love to find people that are enthusiastic about the 90s and Noughties. So without further ado, let's have the first feature of the show. Here is the Empty Compartment. And now it's time for the feature formerly known as the Empty Compartment. And I'm joined here by podcast regular Hayley. Welcome back to the podcast, Hayley. It's been a little while since we did these, and now this is the main bulk of the podcast. Are you feeling a bit nervous?
Not too nervous, no. Thank you for having me back, by the way, Jamie. I appreciate it. It's good to be back.
Yeah, that's all right. And for those that remember the Empty Compartment, you'll know what it is. But if you don't, under its former name, then it's 3 questions, 1 guest. I ask a question, my guest asks a question, and then we have a listener question. So, okay, I'm going to go for it the first time. We're going to start off the questioning, and I'm going to ask about soaps. Were you a soap watcher in the 90s and 2000s, Hayley?
Not so much the 90s, although I can remember my parents watching them. I wasn't really into them as much, but I can remember I actually started getting into soaps in 2005.
Oh, I mean, that was a bumper year. I mean, you had some amazing storylines going on at that particular moment of time. In Emmerdale, Zoe Tate left. In EastEnders, that was the anniversary year where I think they killed off Dirty Den for a second time. was around that time. And Coronation Street, I wouldn't like to guess what was happening. And I think previous guests would call me up on this. Wasn't Brookside off the air by that point?
Brookside went off the air, I believe, in 2000. Because actually, saying that, in the 90s, Brookside was the soap I used to watch. But obviously, at that time, it went off, sadly, which I do miss it. But obviously, 2005, I got into Hollyoaks. And then around the same time, or maybe a year or so later, was Coronation Street. And now, I can list them all. It's like, I think the only ones I don't watch, it is. The only ones I don't watch are EastEnders and Home and Away. I watch all of them except those two.
Even Neighbours.
Yeah, and Doctors as well.
Oh, poor. Yeah. Is Doctors a soap, really, or is it just a continuing drama?
It's classed as a soap. Drama soap, I class it as a soap, but yeah, I can see what you mean, but some people would call it a drama, but it's a soap in my book, so...
it's a weird thing because I studied screenwriting at university and my lecturer was actually a writer on Doctors.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
I know, it is, isn't it? I think it is. I've got a real strange affinity towards soaps. I really like them. They're supposed to be really trashy, but there's something about the characters that really brings you to it. And I know that now they literally have gone off the wagon, as it were. It really is out there. But back in the day, I know from watching some of the classic stuff on ITV3 when they've repeated them, certainly of the main two soaps, or what I would call the main two soaps, they were a lot more about characters rather than outlandish things happening. Yeah,
exactly. Back in the day, like you said, that it was more focused on that rather than the out here storylines and with whatnot, with current things and the way things have changed over time.
Yeah, and I think that outlandish thing sort of started with the Emmerdale plane crash in 1993, which was a massive deal because Emmerdale was this sleepy little soap that had been on the air for like 20 years, and suddenly they needed to do something to make it into a primetime thing, and that was the thing, and they virtually reinvented it from the ground up, which is why I think ITV are almost embarrassed to admit that it was ever called Emmerdale Farm. But
I know, it's hard to imagine now because everyone just knows it's Emmerdale, but obviously back in the day it was Emmerdale Farm, so...
It was, yeah, but they changed that in 89, so not particularly the era that we're talking about, but still, it did become quite outlandish and out there, and I noticed from a lot of EastEnders really, I say Emmerdale changed the game, EastEnders invented the game of being outlandish and out there, because a lot of their stories were almost designed to shock.
Yeah. And actually, when I was in the 90s, actually, I did watch EastEnders with my parents, but obviously they don't watch it anymore. I don't watch it. But there was a time that I did actually watch EastEnders. But I'd say about 96 time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Around the time that Hollyoaks started, and then you were off on that wagon.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Because Hollyoaks has actually just celebrated the 25th anniversary, because obviously they started in 1995, so they've just had their recent celebrations and stuff. But yeah, which was good. So yeah,
I know I've never really given much thought to Hollyoaks or Family Affairs when that was a thing.
I remember Family Affairs. Yeah, I think I saw the odd episode, but I didn't watch it like that. Remember Crossroads though?
Yeah, when they tried to bring it back.
They did, didn't they?
And I remember at the Soap Awards, they had all the cast of Crossroads there, and they were like, we're not going to give any awards to you because you haven't been up long enough. And you think, you could just imagine some of the older members of the audience at home going, oh no, it's been going for a long time. But it did go off, a long time ago, and it came back as a daytime thing.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Again, this is a whole episode by itself. So let's draw that to a close. And by the way, if anybody wants to come on and they feel like, oh, they've already talked about that, I can talk about it again. I don't mind. There's only so many subjects out there, even if there are, lots and lots to choose from. So yeah. What are you thinking, Hayley?
Just going back to really the early noughties, late 90s really as well. Can you remember the magazines, like the pop magazines, the teen magazines were out? I can list a couple of examples if you'd like.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, the only one I'm thinking of is like Smash Hits and that type of thing.
Smash Hits was my favourite, and I was gutted when obviously they stopped producing it, and then they brought back a couple one-off special issues. But I think the only one that's still going now out of all of them is Top the Pops magazine. I think that's the only one that's still going.
That really surprises me that that's still going, considering the programme is pretty much
the fact
gone.
it's only on at Christmas, and that's it anyway. But yeah, so Sneak, TV Hits, Sugar, Ms. I think, from what I remember I used to collect them all at the time. So, but TV Hits was really good. So
I remember TV Hits. Did they used to have CDs in the front of the cover?
Yeah, or like they you did get a lot of cool things free. I remember that. Yeah, so
that was a weird thing, because I've got a couple knocking around, because I think other members of my family used to buy that magazine, and we get the free CD with it, and you'd have like weird versions of stuff. Like I think there's a CD knocking about somewhere in my house of like an Italian version of Quit Playing Games with My Heart by the Backstreet Boys.
Oh wow.
And you're like, okay, this is interesting. I don't know why they chose some of this stuff, but it's wonderful to hear.
But I guess because obviously majority of them came out monthly, but there were that obviously some that came out like every fortnight, and I can remember just like always getting them, and at the end of it, at the back page of the issue, it would always say, "Oh, what's coming next month," or "What you get free." You get all excited. What gift you're going to get, or what features, or what posters you're going to get to be able to put on your wall and all that.
Yeah, because they had posters in there, and it was mainly like boy bandy stuff, wasn't it?
I loved it. Yeah.
Because I don't remember firsthand those magazines, but I have looked back previously, back to there. I've read things since, and obviously I'd done a little bit of research on stuff before then, and I don't remember quite how the interviews were. Were they quite weird questions?
They could be quite random, and touching as well. I know I suppose it is a thing as well. I know that I don't think. I don't know. Did they release? Was there a Kerrang magazine maybe? And I was going to say NME. I know NME isn't going anymore as well. Just touching on the same thing in regards to music and stuff.
There were quite a few music magazines that were like that. NME obviously being the big one, and I think there was a Kerrang magazine, and there's Q as well.
Q, I remember Q. Yeah, but that's what I mean. It's just. It would just be weird, like going into a newsagents now. And I said the only one that I know that they're still doing, or at least they were. I haven't checked as of late. Was obviously Top the Pops. So,
which is really bizarre. Unless, was that a BBC magazine?
Yeah.
See, it's really weird because I know that was it Top Gear. I think someone wanted to buy Top Gear in the early 2000s, and they couldn't because the BBC was still producing the magazine to tie in. And of course, with Top of the Pops, I just wondered, whether it was a 1970s situation where there was a magazine called Top of the Pops that wasn't actually connected, but obviously that is the case.
Yeah, it always was. And I suppose they can't rename it because, it's just that's what it's known as, isn't it, really? And obviously the programme still exists, because only on annually now, really, isn't it? That's it.
Which is a real shame because it seems to be stuck in a time warp. Same presenters every year, pretty much the same artists, the same feel with retro logos in the background. It's stuck in a time warp, and it's been like that for about 10, 15 years, which is a shame, really, because that programme was iconic, as is the magazines associated with it. Well, thank you for asking that.
That's what I just remembered as well, that there was the UK magazine as well, but obviously that ended because obviously the programme ended. And obviously going on that is surprising, the fact that Top of the Pops magazine's still going.
Yeah, well, maybe I suppose, but to be fair, CD UK, what did that last? About 5 years, whereas Top of the Pops had already been going for like 20 years or something, 30 years. So, yeah, that's fair enough, isn't it? But here we go. Let's go into the third and final question here, which comes from a listener, and they ask... I won't be mentioning any names this time, but on Netflix right now, they've added three iconic shows. They have added Sister Sister, Moesha, and Girlfriends, which are three programs that people have a lot of memories of. And I think the listener is from the United States, and they wondered whether either of us had any memories of those programs prior to them being on Netflix.
Well, Sister Sister and Moesha, yes. I can remember them being... I used to watch Sister Sister quite a bit, and Moesha a bit as well, but mainly Sister Sister. But Girlfriends, I don't really know. I've not heard of. No,
I hadn't heard of that either, and I sat and watched it recently, and it's definitely from 2000. It's definitely slap bang in the middle of this podcast, and it's very funny because there are members of the cast in there that went on to do Blackish, if you're familiar with that, and there's lots of familiar faces in there that have gone on to do other things. But I'm with you that Sister Sister and Moesha, to a much lesser extent, were iconic. I think the former was on T4 at one point.
Yeah.
Definitely, but I didn't realise till recently. You feel like when you watch these things, certainly on our TV, when you don't have a list of the episodes, you feel like you've seen them all, don't you?
Yeah.
And then when you watch them in order, you realise, well, wait a minute, I've actually only seen about 10 episodes, because a lot of these channels just used to repeat the same episodes again and again.
Yeah, I know what you mean. When they've been on TV and that, they do. But actually, in regards to Moesha, I mean, I know the fact that obviously she's a singer, and obviously that's Brandy, isn't it, who was a singer as well, obviously in the 90s.
Yeah. Yeah, I will admit that in answer to the person's question, I don't remember Moesha. I remember it being a thing, and I think it was on channels. And I think I was reading somewhere that it was actually aimed at a much more late-night audience, and they used to cut things out of it when they showed it on kids' television.
I didn't know that, yeah.
No, I didn't know that, and it seems like companies like Disney and Nickelodeon, to a lesser extent, did that a lot, where they started cutting things up, because some of our favourite programs actually come from primetime in America. You know, like you think about when The Simpsons used to be broadcast on BBC Two at 6 o'clock. It's broadcast at like 8:30, 9 o'clock in the evening in the States. And we all know that those are different. It's a different audience.
Completely different, yeah, exactly. So
it's a different audience. So there's so many things that we think are like little kiddie programs, and actually they were aimed at a much more adult audience. And looking up Girlfriends, which has recently gone on there, I have to say I'm surprised it was ever broadcast on something that wasn't aimed at adults in this country, because some of the storylines are a little bit too adult. And I think sometimes something that's intended for prime time can go that far.
Yeah, exactly. So might have to check it out at some point. What you're saying?
It's worth checking it out, and I need to do that with Moesha. And I think that there should be more of this stuff on Netflix. I mean, what else would we like to see?
Well, I just wish that one of the platforms would stream all the 90s cartoons that we liked. None of them seem to, or they do the odd one, you'll find the odd one, but you just can't, you want the whole lot that you can just put on.
Oh, there was once upon a time when they used to have on Netflix, I think it was, they had like Hey Arnold and Rugrats and literally anything, like Rocko's Modern Life, anything that you wanted used to be on there. But I think over time, as things have become more fragmented and split, it's just not happening.
I wish it would. Yeah, as I say, I mean, because I've looked it up many a times trying to find it, and they do in the States, but there's nowhere over here they just don't, or like you've got to pay for it, like because Amazon and that I think they do, and that you've got to pay for each season individually and stuff like that.
Yeah, which is a good model for them. Yeah. It's a good thing for them to do because it's like buying a DVD. But when you just want to revisit something, you don't necessarily want to pay 10 quid just to watch that.
No, but what I will mention is that I know in a recent podcast we did discuss cartoons from back in the day. I don't know if you're aware that, but it's exclusive to Hulu at the moment, but Animaniacs is back and it looks amazing. I don't know if you've seen the trailer, but I highly recommend you do.
Oh my goodness, I've seen that trailer, yeah. That looks amazing.
Yeah. And they've actually stuck to how it was, and it looks brilliant, the format and everything.
Which is a surprise. Because they never stick to how things were. Everything needs to be live action at the moment. I've seen live action remakes coming of Tom and Jerry and Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers as well. I know.
I don't know how I feel about that one because I love Dale.
Oh, they need to leave these things alone.
I know.
They need to leave these things alone. But property needs to be continually making things in order to keep it relevant so that they can sell the old stuff. So hopefully if they're remaking this stuff, they'll start releasing some of the older material out there for us to see.
Exactly. Here's hoping anyway. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, we'll bring this to a close. Thank you very much to the listener for asking that question, and thank you, Hayley, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And now on the podcast, it is time for celebrity birthdays. I am joined now by Danny Simm, who's going to try and guess whose birthday it is in the week in which this episode is released. Now, Danny owns a website which is extremely popular, and it's all based around dice. Tell us more, Danny.
First of all, happy to be here. Thank you very much. So other than being a radio DJ here in the UK, I also run a dice store called thefrogandflute.com. Basically, it's all themed around like a fantasy tavern-esque where you'd go and get your wares before you go out on an adventure. And we sell dice and accessories for Dungeons and Dragons. The tabletop RPG game created by Gary Gygax in the 1980s, which has recently experienced a massive surge into the mainstream pop culture due to appearances on big TV shows and podcasts as well. Like this one of massive and have changed the dynamic of Dungeons and Dragons massively, brought it to a new world, and people need dice to play it, and I happen to be quite good at supplying.
Well, that's
the good dice.
An excellent plug, and I do say to people, go and check it out when you've finished listening to the podcast, or maybe even beyond. Let's see. So, this is a feature called Celebrity Birthdays. And basically, it's a person who's celebrating their birthday in this particular week that we're releasing the podcast. So I would like a string of yes or no questions, and I'll give you little clues along the way.
Okay. Okay, right. So the first question would be, is this person fueled by a creative industry?
Yes.
Okay, good. Are they male?
Yes.
Okay, so a male in a creative industry. Okay, in the noughties, so covering from 2000 to 2009, December 31st. In the noughties, did they have their biggest degree of success?
Well, you could say that, but I think they were just as popular in the 90s.
Oh, okay. I'm terrible at 20 questions. Are they renowned for a particular image, like a particular brand image, that kind of vibe?
You could say that at a certain point in time, they were known for a certain thing. And I'll give you a slight clue here.
Yeah.
They were known in the realm of football, but they're nothing to do with sport.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll also give you another clue. They burst onto the scene in the early 90s,
Okay.
and they are in the field of comedy.
I see. Is it? Can I take a guess at who it is?
You could take a guess, yeah.
Actually, no, I'm not sure, and I don't want to jump the gun, so I'm going to go with a couple more because I'm not 100% confident with this.
Right.
Okay. This person. So we're referring to one singular.
A singular person.
Okay. Are they still working today?
They are still working today. In fact, you might even say they've changed their image, and as they've got older, they've got much mellower than they used to.
Much mellower. Interesting.
Yeah. Sorry,
Does
go
this
on.
person have a particular affection for the music of George Formby?
Aha. Now, you could say that.
Okay. I feel comfortable. I'm going to take a guess. Is it
Okay.
the icon that is Frank Skinner?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You got it. And you're right. And I make reference to him being involved in the football world. Of
Free
course,
Lions.
his most famous Free Lions. That's right. His most famous success coming in 1996, and he also did a show called Fantasy Football League with David Baddiel. And Baddiel and Skinner Unplanned, and he was quite successful in the 2000s because he had his own TV show called The Frank Skinner Show, and he's currently presenter on Absolute Radio.
He is.
As well.
He is. When I was first learning the ukulele, it sort of coincided around the time that Frank Skinner released his George Formby documentary, and I it's not very PC. I dare not sing it now. It'll never work again. But one of the first songs I learned in high school on the ukulele was Osama bin Laden by Frank Skinner, which is such a funny song. Really, it's so brilliant.
Oh, at the time, it was extremely funny, and I think that was on his 2008 tour.
Wow.
Something like that, when it was particularly relevant.
The height of bin Laden's popularity. Not popularity, that's the wrong word.
No, that is the wrong word, yes, and I apologise if
Tyranny.
we've offended anybody.
There we go.
And we would like to wish happy birthday to Frank Skinner, who is 64 on the 28th of January. So happy birthday to Frank, and all the best with the future. And well done, Danny. Thanks for joining us.
No, thanks, Rory. Thanks. No worries. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to 90s and Noughties UK, a podcast on UK pop culture of the 90s and 2000s. Please remember to rate, comment and subscribe on your favourite podcast provider. If you want to contact the show, email 90esandnoughties@gmail.com, tweet us on @90esandnoughties UK on Twitter, or check us out on Facebook, 90s and Noughties UK.